Welcome everyone, my name's Pete Bullimore. I'm a voice hearer, but I'm not just a voice hearer. I'm proud to say I'm a voice hearer. My experiences and I own them. And it's great to be here today doing this presentation for Melissa Roberts Foundation. So what we're looking at, we're looking at training module 4. Today we're going to be looking at making sense of paranoia using the 3 stages look beyond the person's behaviour. Now the MRF offers a series of online training modules around the experience of hearing voices and paranoia. Now, when we're looking at the 3 phases of paranoia, we're looking at the thoughts, the feelings and the behaviour. It's very, very important. Now, the trigger or the thoughts could be an external event or perception. Conspiracy to feelings could be a sense of threat or anxiety. Conviction is behaviour, a protective reaction. Now, it's very important when we look at this. Cognitive behavioural therapy purists, they will tell you we always have a thought before we have a feeling. That is nonsense. You can have a feeling before you have a thought. I'm sure people watching this now have probably woken up in the morning and felt quite anxious. And you think, why am I feeling so quite anxious? You realise you've got to do what you've got to do in the course of the day. So it can go both ways. But for some people, this can cycle really quickly. But sometimes what you've got to always identify in this is something called an alarm system. Something we are going to look at, and it's the alarm system that creates the triggers. So it's a little bit deeper than what people often think. Now, to trigger the thoughts, somebody might say, they just looked at me strangely. Are they sniggering at me? Perhaps it seems quite innocuous. Then the conspiracy, the feelings. I don't feel safe. I'm getting very anxious. They're definitely plotting something. Then we have to start with the social withdrawal. Then we've got the conviction, the behaviour. I'm going to hide away. I don't feel safe around people. So which of the above is the main problem? Trigger, conspiracy, conviction, thoughts, feelings or behaviour. Now when I ask this question, people often say it's the behaviour. Well, it could be, but it probably isn't. Because the behaviour becomes the problem. It isn't the problem. What we've got to start looking at is, we've got to look at the thoughts and the feelings that's creating this behaviour. Now, when those thoughts are triggered, we need to try and make sense of them, rationalise them. We get to the feelings, the conspiracy. Now this is where we get into a stage of anxiety. It's very, very important to understand anxiety is not paranoia. Anxiety is a component of paranoia. It is not paranoia itself. This is where we're trying to put the brakes on, so we don't finish up in the conviction stage. Now if you're working with hearing voices, we have startling, organisational, stabilisation phase. You want to be in the 3rd phase. With paranoia you do not. But a lot of people that are already in psychiatric care, they're in the conviction stage. So when people are in psychiatric care, the way to work with it, you have to work backwards. You're working totally opposites than what brought them into services. Looking at conviction, what's the story? What's happening now? You are going to hear some very, very elaborate beliefs, but there's always a seed of truth. That's the important thing. We have to find that seed of truth. Then the conspiracy to history. How have you got here? What brought you to services? If you've got an understanding of that person's journey into psychiatric care, you will see elements of it in that story. Then the triggers are past and the present. Determine the relationship with past events and present experiences. So when those thoughts are triggered, based upon the narrative that we know, we can make sense of them, we can rationalise them, so we don't finish up in the conviction stage. So in services, you're going to be working from the conviction, back to the triggers, but once we've identified those triggers, stops people going back into the conviction stage. That's the important thing. So identifying the alarm system. This is a great quote from Carl Rogers. Man's inability to communicate is a result of his failure to listen effectively, skillfully and the understanding to another person. Because it's important to remember, trauma goes, but thoughts and memory remain. Fearful situations stay in the brain and they're very, very easily activated. Now, a negative response would be people dismissing your thoughts, telling you they're not real. A positive response would be, when did this belief start? What was happening at that time in your life? About 12 years ago. What was happening 12 years ago? It's very important to find out what starts this. It's very, very important. Because the relationship is more important than the therapy. You're better off having a great relationship and a crap therapy. And a crap relationship and a great therapy. It doesn't work. It's a great quote from Carl Rogers. Man's inability to communicate is a result of his failure to listen effectively, skillfully and understanding to another person. You've got to hear, you've got to listen, you've got to reflect. I used to assess CBT students many years ago. There was myself and two other assessors. Now, don't get me wrong, some of them were very, very good, but some of them would make a fundamental error. They'd be interviewing someone with lived experience. They'd come out and say, you've just made an error in there, what is it? They could never see it. So, tell us how we set the session. Well, we set the agenda. Okay, how did you finish the session? We set homework. Okay, what's the mistake you just made with the homework? You've got to set homework in CBT. I'm not arguing that case with you. You never bothered to ask your client whether they can read or write. You made an assumption. If they can't read or write and you set them homework, the chances are they will disengage from that service. And who gets the blame? The person for disengagement. If somebody's not engaging with us, we have to look at ourselves. What is it about me that this person is not engaging with me? Because the relationship is more important than the therapy. Now, if we continue to focus on the behaviour, it's a vicious circle. It goes round and round and round, and we do not break that cycle of threat. Look at how we can actually break that cycle of threat. Quite often, when people get paranoid, getting increased arousal, I call myself a scanner. I can spot danger very, very quickly. I'll give an example on this. It's a few years ago. I was going to work in London. It was November. It was 5:30 in the morning. It's dark and it was damp. I walked down the steps where I live and I saw a man walking down the road. Call that healthy paranoia. I'm aware someone's going to be following me in the dark. It takes me 30 minutes to walk to the train station. This guy followed me. Never once tried to walk past me. Then he followed me into the train station. He stood very close on my shoulder. He watched me buy a ticket for London. Then he bought one. And he sat opposite me on the train and he never spoke. I'm just playing this down. This is coincidence. This is nothing. I got off the train in London and I went and got on the underground. And he followed me. He stood right behind me on the underground. Bit of a conspiracy, what's going on here? I got off at Holborn High Street and so did he. He followed me down Holborn High Street. 2 hours 30 minutes, I'm convinced this man is following me. I stopped outside the training room. He walked past and he smiled. I perceived it as a smirk. Why is he smirking at me? Now there's two ways I can go with this. The first one, apart from my wife and the lady I was working with, nobody knew I was going to London. How do you know to walk down the street at 5:30 in the morning? Would a lay person pay £256 on the day for a ticket? No, they wouldn't. Then I can go the other way. A lay person wouldn't, but somebody in authority would. Where's my fear of authority come from? Being sexually, physically and emotionally abused for 8 years by 3 people in authority. Trauma goes, thoughts and memory remain, and they're very, very easily activated. Now if we don't deal with that, it becomes an emotional overload. Once that person gets that emotional overload, they'll start to social withdraw. That social withdrawal acts as a retreat and protection. Might lock themselves in the front room or the home, they don't want to come out. Now responses at this point from family members and workers is very, very important. If that person just being seen as being lazy and they're put under excessive pressure, you can't stay in here all day, you've got to go out, you've got to do something, but you don't know what that threat is. And that threat is, if I go out there, someone's going to shoot me in the head. If you're a family member that says you love me, or a worker that says you care, why are you trying to put me in a place of danger? All that is, you'll continue as that, you won't break that cycle of threat. So when we start to work with belief systems, you've got to have clear, supportive, positive communication. Be very concise in what you say. Slip of a word might be built into something you don't mean. And I'm trying to make sense of their experiences. I'll give you an example. There's a young man I was working with and he got sectioned under the Mental Health Act and there was no beds for him in Sheffield where we live. So they outlaid him at a place called Harrogate. This guy is an amazing escapologist. Within 48 hours he's escaped and he's on the run. Eventually they caught him, found a bed for him in Sheffield and they brought him back. Well, I know he's a psychiatrist and he called me and he said, Pete, we've got a friend of yours here, mate, will you come and see him? So I went to see him. This room was full of staff as I walked in. And my friend sat there and he says, oh Pete, did you hear I escaped in Harrogate? I said, yeah, I've heard. Well, I was walking through Harrogate, Pete. I saw the Queen of England driving along in a little car. She's got a Union Jack wing mirror cover on, so I stole it. Said, she got out and started complaining. But a right argument with the Queen in Miller Harrogate. They're all sat there just shaking their heads. And this guy's lost his coat. So I'll tell you what you don't know, Pete. I have found the Holy Grail. I'm the only living person that knows where it is. So I've put my coat over it. So when the second person gets there, you know, I was there first. What do you think to that then? So before I can say anything, this psychiatrist said, your friend's very unwell. And I said, no, he's not. He said, he's psychotic. I said, no, I heard you the first time. Stop repeating yourself. Let me explain something to you because you've never bothered to ask him. In the last 12 months, he's lost his job. His wife's thrown him out of the family home. He's nowhere to live and she won't let him see his children. What control has he got in this life? Can't be a husband, a father, a homeowner, a provider. He's got no control in this world at all. In his world he has. He can argue with the Queen. He knows where the Holy Grail is. You can't tell him he's wrong. You don't know where it is. What this guy needs is very intense bereavement counselling. And I can because bereavement's not all about death, it's about loss. And I can respect this psychiatrist who got it him. A few months later, this guy's still got a lot of work to do, but he's dipping his toe back into this world. If things get difficult, it's a world he can retreat back into. He's not going to try and get rid of those beliefs, we're going to try and make them secondary so the person can function and then we can break the cycle of threat. That's the important thing. But how paranoid beliefs are maintained? Paranoia persists due to avoidance, lack of knowledge about anxiety, social skills, there's no reality testing, unsuccessful strategies to reinforce the beliefs, and a lack of communication. Effective intervention or as form of therapeutic alliance, adopt a non-confrontational approach. Paranoid beliefs may serve as a protective function, and support self-esteem rather than challenging the beliefs directly. Some informational questions, very important. Now, how did you cope? What did you do? Was that time you noticed yourself being monitored? What did it feel like? Look at those feelings, they're very important. Can I give you an example? I was in Massachusetts in America a few years ago and I received a phone call from a lady and she said, I hear you're in America, will you please see my son? He's quite paranoid. Well, they were in Las Vegas, so I didn't really want to do this because of lack of continuity. But she kept contacting me and I said, well, you'll have to come to Massachusetts. They flew over. It's Saturday morning, I'm sat in this hotel lobby. He came with this guy and he had a big smile on his face. He was 31 years old, the son. And I just said to his mum, can you leave us a couple of hours and come back? As soon as she walked out of that hotel lobby, you have never seen a look of fear go across someone's face in all your life, as fast. And he went, can you see him, Pete? I says, who? FBI, CIA, KGB. Behind him gas tanks, Pete, you must be able to see him. I said, I'm sorry, I can't see them. I sat chatting for about an hour and then I said to him, you know these organisations that you're talking about? They are billion-pound organisations. If they want you to disappear, mate, you're going to disappear. And no one's ever going to find you. But they haven't done it. So I'm going to ask you to do something, but don't do it for more than 5 seconds. Because I can't feel your fear. You know, I can empathise with it, but I can't feel it. For 5 seconds only, imagine that there's no fear at all. No fear at all. But billion-pound organisations are interested in you. How would you feel? And his words straight away, special. That's your clue. Special. I said, tell me other times in your life you've never felt special. I said, I've never felt special, Pete. One of the times my parents saw me was to hurt me. His dad was a hotshot lawyer in Las Vegas and he wanted him to be a lawyer. He's an author, he didn't want to be a lawyer. When he was 12 years old, his parents divorced. And from Tuesday to Saturday, he had to live with his dad. He'd come home from school. Dad would say, are you going to be a lawyer? No. Take your shirt off. Take your shirt off. Take your belt off. He would whip him across the back every night to convince him to be a lawyer. He'd go home on a Saturday to his mum's, go and get in the shower, come downstairs, no shirt on, open wounds on his back, and his mum never mentioned it. Again, we're back to the invisibility. His mum came back and I said, could you tell your mum what you've just told me? He said, I can't do it. I said, you can, you're an adult now, you're not a child. Tell your mum what you just told me. And he told her, she said, well, that never happened. I said, do me a favour, will you, mate? Lift your shirt up at the back. Raised welts all the way down his back. And I said to his mum, you'll tell me how he's got them then. And that's when she burst into tears. I said, I'm not saying he's blaming, I'm not saying he's blaming you, he's entitled to be bloody angry with you. And that's where the conversation has to start to break down those barriers in that relationship as well. Then it's exploratory questions. You know, could anything bad happen if you were monitored? Have you had this happen to anyone else? What would it mean if this did happen? How small would a camera need to be? There's a lady I worked with many years ago, and she talked about someone filming her in her flat, in her apartment. We could never find these cameras. Doesn't mean they were never there. What if the person brought them with them, did what they did with the camera, then took them away? We can't make an assumption that they were never there. What led police to be interested in you? How much would surveillance cost? So again, if we're looking at the next training module for the Mr. Roberts Foundation, it's going to be the mass strict interview approach for problematic thoughts, beliefs and paranoia. Now, after viewing this video, if you feel you require assistance or support, please contact Lifeline's 24-hour support line. There's 131114. Now that's the support line in Australia. You may be in a different country. In England it would be the Samaritans, different countries with different support lines. Please see if you can find a support line if you do need support. It's very, very important because you're doing some very difficult things. Or you could contact your mental health practitioner or a family member or friend. There are support services out there that we can use. Thank you.